something we
This meeting is being recorded.
Sorry,
okay,
guys.
cool. No, that's
uh,
cool. As long as you upload
yes.
me to YouTube, that's cool. I'm joking. Don't.
Um,
um,
That's great, Tommy. Yeah, that's really cool. I wanna hear more about it. But maybe we'll do it if you can stay on. We have a section at the end of the event to talk about that, to network all those things,
mhm.
because I think we should probably get started. Pico's here. Hi, Pico. Sorry
Hi,
about the link
Pico.
mix-up.
Hi, Pico.
Great. All right. Should we start?
Yeah, let's start. Jeremy, is your internet okay? Can
Oh,
everyone see Jeremy? He's frozen. Oh, okay, he's back.
I'm back.
Okay.
Okay, let's just get going. Welcome, everyone. So like we just talked about, those of you here a little early, this is our conversation on choreography, digital embodiment, basically how dance and movement is being represented in the virtual space, which is a new frontier with a lot of possibilities. So briefly to introduce us, Sculpture, we're a new creative startup at the intersection of performance, technology, and global culture. We're working on creating virtual events. We'll talk more about ourselves at the end, unless you want to add anything.
Um, I think, did everyone hear Jeremy okay? I think you were broken for a few seconds.
He cut off towards the very end of his speech.
Yes. So, I guess to summarize, Sculpture is a creative startup at the intersection of performance, technology, global culture, and we create virtual events and we've tried to facilitate new modes of interaction for live performances. And we try to build a community between the fringe artistic community and the artistic community that's interested in tech, and also audiences across the globe. And we're trying to facilitate research, collaborations, and create new forms of performing arts, especially in the intersection between performance and technology. And we want to push boundaries of what performance or performing arts can be, both digitally and in the physical world. And we also want to push the boundaries of geography, time zone, nationality, language, and build a bridge between all the places conceptually and geographically. And yeah, allow like-minded people to build a global community. And so today, our topic, what we're trying to explore is the digital space and dance and choreography. And as the whole metaverse and virtual space has become more and more of a hit topic, and I'm really interested in how dance and choreography can explore a meaning or like meaningful interactions in this kind of digital space. So the format today, we'll start with allowing our guests to do a demo or short presentation of their work. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to leave it in the chat section. And then after that, we'll have a half-hour panel discussion. And then we'll open the floor to anyone to ask questions. And yep, should we start?
Yeah, so just a couple things. If you don't mind, please mute yourself if you're not actively talking. And like Ewan said, the three speakers are going to give a short introduction of themselves. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. We'll ask them after. Very excited to introduce our three panelists who are working on, again, this sort of cutting edge between how the physical body can be represented in a digital space in really interesting ways, or combinations of digital arts along with movement and dance. So we're going to go in this order. We have Clemence Debaig. Is that, I'm sorry if I pronounced your last name wrong. Clem.
Perfect.
Oh, it's perfect. Great. We have Michael, so Clemence coming from the UK, from London. We have Michael Landez, currently coming from Iowa, Chicago. And we have Pico Velasquez coming from Los Angeles. So we'll go in that order, and I'll just let each speaker introduce themselves as they introduce their work, because they can do it better than me. All right, Clem, you want to start?
Yes, for sure. I've prepared some things to show you. Can you make me co-host so I could share my screen?
Sorry, I make you spotlight. Can you share your screen?
No, I think you need to make me co-host.
Oh, I'm not sure how.
So if you go to the
Oh, yes.
yeah.
Yes, I got it. Can you do it now?
Yes. Oh, you made me host. Okay, I need to be careful not messing up anything.
Oh.
There we go. You should be able to see my screen now. There we go. Yeah, because without slides, I don't know who I am. So there we go. All right. So I've kind of prepared a few just images to give you an idea of the type of work I do. So my name is Clem Debaig. I'm originally French. I am based in London, and I tend to describe myself as a dance artist, designer working in UX and XR, and a creative technologist. I'm also the artistic director of Unwired Dance Theatre, which I'm going to talk about a lot. And I'm also a lecturer and researcher at Goldsmiths University, which fits in my work massively. So I have kind of three main hats at the moment, and I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about the work we do at Unwired Dance Theatre. I want to talk about the work I do at Goldsmiths. And I'm going to leave aside the fact that I have sometimes other roles as a creative technologist or XR designer for other artists, but that definitely fits into my work anyway. So let's talk quickly about kind of those three in kind of size of my practice. On one side, I am a dancer, so that movement practice and embodied practice is really core into what I do. I'm also have a big background in UX design, so working on interaction is also key to what I do. And then this is mixed with the ability to actually create technological enabled performances and experiences, which leads to bringing those three things together. And what I do basically is choreographing experiences that have a lot of audience participation at its core, and then using technology to enable those participation, using the movement practice to understand how people evolve in the space, physical space or virtual space, and using my UX and interaction design background to choreograph all of that and make sure that people are able to interact together. So let's talk a little bit about Unwired Dance Theatre. So what we do at Unwired is to create immersive and playable experiences, so that audience participation is really at the core of what we do. We work with remote performances, in real life or virtual stages, galleries, or more in conventional sites. And I will go through the type of themes we work with, but that involves a lot of exploration around empathy, especially when mediated through technology and through virtual spaces, and exploring what remote connection looks like. We work with a range of technologies from mocap, VR, wearables, and everything in between. And I wouldn't say we are specialized in any technologies, but more kind of looking at what's the best option for enabling the type of experience we're trying to create. So I'm going to go through a few of the questions some of our work is looking at. So we've been looking a lot at how our sense of empathy is affected when interactions are mediated with technology. And we've talked a little bit about empathy, but you will see in a lot of our work, notions of harassment and control tend to come back a lot in the projects we're exploring. So the first project I want to mention is called Bother, which is a project I presented in real life, where I created a mix between a durational performance installation and playable experience, where the audience was presented kind of encountering a performer and faced with the choice to either click on the red button and influence negatively the experience of the performer in front of them, or click on the blue button and go towards more joyful experiences. Depending on their choices, the reaction of the dancer in front of them would change, and they would embody a different emotional state. This is something that can be experienced as a one-to-one interaction, or that can also turn into a group interaction where you have a group of audience members then making a decision and competing for what would happen to the performer in front of them. From a slightly more technical point of view, the dancers are actually being tracked in the space, and there is a projection happening on their body, and the choreography or more kind of textures they are embodying and the visuals are evolving depending on the choices of the audience in real time. I'm just going to let this play a tiny bit longer. I've also realized that I haven't selected, bear with me. Can I do that? No. Check computer sound. There we go. That's going to work better. Okay, I'm going to pass a little bit faster. I can send a few links afterwards. Second kind of consideration, at the very beginning of the lockdown, we started being very, very concerned and obsessed with the ability to create intimacy and to be able to touch online or touch virtually. So that led to this project called Remote Intimacy, that was working with a dancer in New York and a dancer in London and exploring this notion of remote intimacy and how do we create intimacy in virtual spaces, and how could we feel and touch each other online. So I'm just going to play this. So throughout this project, we were exploring a lot of different type of thematic techniques to be able to dance and perform live in that setup, but also using wearable technology to start being able to touch and feel each other. It's always the game of trying to move to the next slide. There you go. So that went through developing those two jackets.
Brand bias in corporate mainstream media. Political bias disturbs me. One political centrist left. Small L libertarian is moving philosophically to moderate centrist, small C conservative. So on the graph, I'm dead center. I know it shocks me also.
Sorry, I'm being confused. This is definitely not me playing sound.
A 3D 360 human being who's complicated. I'm not tied to one political thought mindset or policies.
Can you hear this sound being played?
That we have
okay, that's for me.
Looks like everyone else is muted though.
Demonizing any
Proctor is talking
from the status quo.
Okay. Sorry, this is being disruptive a little bit. I can use them as the host because I'm the host.
Yeah, so I forgot to unmute myself. I was gonna ask you to make me a co-host.
I think that's it.
But just keep going for now. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
There's no co-host option. That's why I think you had to make me a host earlier. Anyway, okay, let me crack on. Let me go back to it. So yeah, so part of the project was really important to find a way to actually being able to touch and feel each other from a distance. And then we realized there was an interesting balance that we needed to find between the experience of the dancers being able to feel each other, but also the experience of the audience and understanding what's happening and what the dancers are experiencing. So what you're seeing here is the first early prototype looking, that's my face, looking at different type of interactions from pressure sensors to capacitive sensors to haptic feedback and LEDs, and trying to understand what would fit better the experience of the dancers and the experience for the audience, which I prototyped really roughly, so we can start having dancers being remote and then experiencing this together, and both evaluating this from the experience of the dancers and how they can react to each other, to how, as an audience member, we start understanding what's going on or not understanding what's going on, which then led to a slightly more advanced prototype where we're focusing on capacitive touch and haptic feedback, and then LEDs for the audience to kind of see what's happening, up to the jackets you've seen in the trailer video. Moving on, I'm going to skip this because we're going to run out of time. Then moving on from that, also exploring how collaboration, more than sense of control, can give us a sense of togetherness and liveness, which is another project that explores ideas of collaboration and control and intimacy, called Strings, which is a performance that's happening remotely, but the audience is invited to take part and can make decisions collectively as how the dancers would move. So through wearables that we've developed specifically for this, this is not loading anymore, here we go. The audience can follow live the performance, and by using a web app, can see each other on that interface and then interact with each other to make a decision. And then once they make a decision on a quadrant, then this sends some haptic feedback to the dancer, and then this is the body part that's being moved. That performance has now evolved massively into hybrid performances, remote performances, and then have also redeveloped the wearables themselves, and then ported this performance in WebXR, where I have transformed the web app that people had on their phone into an interactive floor mat in virtual reality, and then making a decision with their own bodies as to where which body parts they should activate, and then seeing the feedback with the video integrated into that virtual environment. And then more recently, we're now working, and it's a project that we have currently in progress, that's for Unwanted Waters, where we're exploring how we can create more inclusive and safer spaces, and kind of taking old myth around kind of closed communities and then making the parallel what's happening now in digital communities, looking into empathy and then rite of passage, and then how do we actually enter those different communities, and what potential issues and that can happen in those environments. So this is this project called Unwanted Waters. This is a live mocap performance in WebXR. So this is performed completely live, and it is accessible in completely accessible in a browser, which means that people can join either on their computer or on a VR headset if they are available, and they can then be co-present with the dancers in that virtual environment completely live. So I'm just going to play the trailer quickly. So this is the first chapter, where it was just me in mocap and VR, dancing in a headset, and then being able to interact in that virtual environment in real time with the audience. There's no music. Okay, anyway. And for the funny story, this all happens here in my living room. And then in chapter 2 that we are just developed very recently, this time around, we've got 2 dancers, one dancer in London, which is me, and one dancer in New York, and then we are dancing in duet in real time together, being in the same virtual space than the audience. And this time around, also mixing live video, so people have more of an understanding of what's happening with the mocap, and then exploring this idea of crossing a portal from the physical space to the virtual space and entering that virtual environment and safe space there. I want to invite everyone to the work we're doing at the moment. We have weekly live streams on Twitch. It's 5 p.m. British time on every Sunday, so on Twitch. So this is Unwired Dance on Twitch, and carry on doing this work with mocap with Christia, who's based in New York. And it's just a series of prototypes that we are exploring, which is kind of a big playground. It's very relaxed, and we are exploring different scenes, different type of interactions, different type of avatars, So come and play with us. We also like interacting with people in the chat, so it's quite a fun kind of interactions we have there. And just making a quick parallel with what I'm doing at Goldsmiths. So the work I'm doing at Goldsmiths is a research project where we are exploring the potential of motion capture for virtual collaboration. And we have last year explored different kind of creative potential for having dancers in remote locations with mocap, and how can they dance together in the virtual space. And I'm going to show you a few visuals of that. So this is what we did in May last year, where we had 3 dancers in 3 different locations, including dancers dancing from their own space, being together in their virtual space. And I'm going to show you a quick exploring ideas of remote touch and other type of interactions. I'm going to move a little bit faster because I know I'm way out of time already. This is the second example where this time around we had 2 dancers, and we had matched one of the motion capture suits to different interactions. So Tia, you have on the bottom right, she's controlling the opening of the petals with the distance between her thumb and her middle finger. So she is controlling this kind of opening of the flower by using different parts. So this project is now moving on. We are currently running a virtual residency with 5 teams, so with dancers and creative technologists across all continents. We'll see where that's going to lead. At the moment, we're just starting, but we want to explore how other dancers and other creative technologists are going to make the most of it. And I think that's it. Here we go. Okay, that was a brief overview.
Thank you so much, Clem, for your presentation. And you can, you and Michael and Pico as well, after your demo, you feel free to leave your social or your contact detail, or anyone else, please leave your social on the group chat, so if everyone can follow you afterwards. Yes, I'm not sure how the host thing works. So Clem, could you perhaps pass the host throne to Michael? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Clem. That was amazing, super inspiring. For everyone who maybe joined us late, this is Sculpture with Choreography and Digital Embodiment. Please make sure you mute yourself if you're not talking. We just had Clemence Debaig give us a presentation, and now we have Michael Landez.
Thank you so much, Clem. That was so exciting. I love wearable tech. It's like I've only encountered it from teaching science summer camp, so it's very exciting when it intersects with dance. Thank you for sharing. Okay, I'm going to share my whole desktop because I love chaos. That's what I'm good at. So I'm just going to play these in the background. My name is Michael Landez. I consider myself to be primarily a performer and performance theorist. And so a lot of my work right now has been based primarily out of the University of Iowa. The piece that you're observing now is a piece that I performed in that was co-created by choreographer Jennifer Kale and media designer Dan Fine. And it instigated for me a lot of questions about notions of ephemerality and ephemera in performance, questioning the idea of dance as interactive and dance as environment, and where media of the body live in performance. And so this particular excerpt that you're looking at is just as simple as the Dora patch being run through a projection software. And in my work specifically, the way that I view and look at the mediated body in performance, I'm curious about the way that time plays into how we view the mediated body. I'm curious about putting mediated dance in dialogue with current performance studies scholarship on the notions of live performance as ephemeral, and then in Rebecca Schneider's famous quip, what remains in performance. And so, we'll stop this one. This brings me to a project that a colleague and I, Juliet Romers, and I did all pandemic long, and it just kept living a bajillions of lives. It started with us making a dance film in collaboration with an oboist in our School of Music building, simply because that was one of the only spaces that we were allowed to dance that wasn't our living room. And so this particular performance enabled and engendered the idea of ephemerality of performance as non-ephemeral, as reproducible, and that like the ephemera is the media that remains, rather than having live interactive performance in which the mediated body is ephemeral. And so my research has a lot of dialoguing back and forth between notions and idea of where like the ontological stability of the performer exists within these digital spaces. And so this particular project played a lot with the, it like flirted between the ideas of site-specific dance through dance film techniques, but then also with like the geometry of the space itself, as we moved like through these sort of rote techniques that are like historically like involved within our bodies that have like settled. So we were curious to play with these senses of time of where and when these sort of techniques and like concert dance forms exist when they can't exist in the proscenium stage where they have traditionally existed, which then leads us to the next iteration of this particular project, which was an installation-based project. And then this, we pulled back again into playing with ideas of how to pull away from the identity of the dancer. So playing with like epistemological play and notions of how the mediated body exists as a way of knowing, or as a way of thinking about how we are perceived in society. And sorry, I got distracted. So thinking about moving from this like sort of like theory of knowledge to the idea of like the way that we exist and the way that we are, the sort of ontological stability. And then that leads into this most recent project that I did, which was actually presented this weekend as part of my thesis concert. I'm gonna go through some concept photos. This was actually conceived by my brother, who is currently studying architecture and set design at Princeton, so credit where credit is due. I stole it from him, but then I like to think I made it better. And I was curious about how to play with the idea of using culturally charged media. And so we designed these what are called papel picados, and each one is individually designed on Adobe Illustrator to demonstrate ontological extensions of myself. So past forms of myself, past places, past people that are that I consider to be a part of like this network that has formed me to get to this particular place in my scholastic experience and performative experience. And then from there, we were able to play with, and then we readapted back to the original Isadora software. Here's some more examples of what the individual looks like. and then how that comes together as like an amalgamation of selfhood in a singular body. And then with that, we're playing with the idea of media and mediated forms as a sort of veiling or invisibilizing or closeting, if you will, of experience. And so really getting to put into dialogue ideas of selfhood and how the mediated form is a power to both make invisible and to demonstrate the parts of ourselves that we want to be seen or unseen, as it were. And so that's more or less, that's like a really brief introduction, but I really like, my research right now is really interested in those sorts of intersections of where we move from theories of knowing and theories of being through the mediated form. And I look at it a lot from a performer. So yeah, that's kind of my thing. Yes.
Well, thank you, Michael. That's really interesting, and I have a lot of questions, but we will hold them until after. So next up we have Pico Velasquez. Michael, do you mind making her the host?
I'm on it.
In case she wants to share anything.
Oh no, I did it wrong.
Just make someone else
How
the
did that
host
happen?
randomly.
Thank you, Ewan. I'm sorry.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy, for having me here. And it's great to see everyone's presentations as well. It's very exciting to see how different disciplines approach very similar notions of space, form, movement, rhythm. In general, it's about expression, I believe. And I think it's just very beautiful to see different perspectives. So my background is in architecture. So I was trained as a dancer. I danced classical ballet for 15 years. Then I studied mathematics and architecture, and then I became more of a physical architect that now translated into multimedia direction and now into metaverse design. But I think in the core of everything, like I think the way that dancers express themselves is something that we can see throughout so many different mediums that has withheld through the change or like the evolution of my career as well. So I'm going to walk you through some of the projects that I've done. They don't have dance, so I feel kind of ashamed in that sense. But you'll see the passion of movement that consistently is within my work. Let's see. Okie dokie. Did I put all this? Great. So I'll start with some big projects. Just to give a sense of like the type of work that I do, and essentially how at the end it's really about form, movement, color. Like I said, it's about expression. And I think that whether it's something that has to do with a dancer's body or it has to do with an architectural form, all of these end up influencing and affecting the environment for others, whether that others are the audience or it's the users or it's the people that work inside the space or live on it in a daily basis. So one of the most prominent projects that I've been a part of have been the new Google headquarters in Mountain View, California. And this is a project with the Arc Angles group in which I was the director of the canopy geometry, meaning that designing the geometrical aspects of the architectural space. And for this, essentially what we wanted to do is make a very open environment that would have everyone hosted inside of the same space. So instead of thinking of like the cubicle building or the office space in a more traditional format, it's like, what if we could completely transform the architectural shape of it to also change the way that people behave inside of it? So the idea here is that it's a very flowy, almost tented space. It's all made out of steel deck and steel frame, so it's not really tented, but it does give you like that very light, almost like ephemeral look to it as well. And the essence of it was that instead of having spaces that are subdivided, what if we could create like a very open community that could be consistently building their work inside of this world in a shared environment. So this is kind of like a render of how this environment would look like, where every subgroup or sub lab inside of the Google headquarters will be able to have their special space that is very creative and unique to their own identity, but that could be all encapsulated under one single canopy or like one single environment. So this is under construction. It's actually very close to done, so I should update this. But it's, yeah, check it out. It's in Mountain View, California. Another project that I did on the architectural side, and then I'll get more into my multimedia project, is the Elysium. And Elysium was with Guy Laliberté, the founder of Cirque du Soleil. And this is another project in which you really see the translation of form into experience. So here what we wanted to create was a memorial, almost like a library for human lives, a memorial of humanity. This was very inspired by the Burning Man temple, of like wanting to understand society as a whole through a compilation of memories and experiences. So the way that we wanted to portray this journey was that instead of like a typical museum that you go into, a lot of spaces that are like adjacent or subsequent to each other, we wanted to create like this very intricate, continuous path that would like unveil itself into like an individual journey that would turn into a communal journey, and then would turn into like an internal journey. So the way that we designed this as a whole was very much inspired by Escher and all of our license work. So using in this case, like as a double spiral projected onto a sphere. In this case, we would have different levels of the sphere. So for example, in the section here, you can see that there's a path that goes on the outside of the building, and that's like the first path where you get to have like access to all these beacons, what we would call like the books of human lives. And then essentially it would guide you into the Memorial Dome, which was a shared experience for multiple people through projection mapping, to have like these intimate yet communal moments of expression, whether it was certain specific events or if it was more tailored to for example, like we could be celebrating Dia de los Muertos, so we could be doing an event around a specific person that had deceased, and we were doing an anniversary, etc. And then the last piece, which was like the conclusion of this, is like the inversion or like the opposite of it, of the communal space, which is the internal space. It's called the memorial release. And the memorial release is a space where at the end of the whole journey, you would leave a memory in the space that would just be able to become part of the architecture for that day. So essentially, you would arrive to the end of the building to read everyone's experience, like their personal experience and how they were impacted by it. And I think the beautiful part of this is that in most of architecture work, we go through in a very transient way in which we are moved, we are touched, but there isn't a message that is being left behind, and there isn't an understanding of how other people perceive it. So this was just like a very beautiful intent of like, if we were to like access everyone's dreams or everyone's minds or everyone's feeling at the end of this, could we see it as a whole, and could we also understand like all of humanity's intention and perception of the space as a whole? And at the end of the day, there would be the memorial release, which means that there would be a ceremony, all these memories, dreams would get released to the moon, and there would be a blank canvas for the next day to start new. Then I started working more also with multimedia spaces, so like really linking virtual environments with physical spaces. This is a project that I did for the Hard Rock Casino and Hotel. It concluded its construction maybe like about a year and a half ago. If anyone is in Florida, Hollywood, Florida, go check it out. It's called the Guitar Hotel. But essentially, this space, and I'll show you videos of how it looks like. But essentially, it's a fully multimedia space in the sense that we have spatial audio, we have lighting diodes, we have a moving waterfall that's controlled by different beacons, it's like beacons of light, beacons of water, beacons of absolutely everything. And I think what's super interesting here is that essentially I wanted to make the architecture dance. I wanted to feel alive. I wanted to feel dynamic. I wanted the audience or the people that pass through it to really connect to a space in a way that traditional architecture doesn't allow you to. So in this case, I'll show you the video so you get more sense of it. But we worked with 8 different music artists here, which included from like jazz to like what's his name, Miles Davis, to like Pitbull, to Maroon 5. So it was like Jamiroquai. It was like a really fun group of like diversified artists, like very Hard Rock Casino hotels who want to represent everyone. And what we did is that with each of these artists, we worked on different color tonalities that would represent their music, different shapes that would represent also like the way that they create, and essentially just like create this whole environment that would come together, or come to life when people would pass through it. So the video I'm going to show here is kind of a compilation of all of them, not of any specific show. So similar to that note, but more from a branding perspective. Oh no. Okay. But more from a branding perspective, I worked on a project with Kenzo Digital called Social Galaxy. And Social Galaxy, although it is based on Samsung's Social Galaxy, meaning that we were actually representing all the different products that they have in the space, which was a combination of like TVs, tablets, and phones. Essentially, what we wanted to create was an experience that would really start questioning your digital identity, your digital self, and how we are representing ourselves in this digital space. So the space is designed to be it's a cylindrical space, very small. We've done it different shapes in different parts of the world. So some of the photos and videos you'll see are vertical versus horizontal, but it has like this Jajoi Kusama, like infinite chamber perception with mirrors. And essentially it's just a room with all these devices and with mirrors that make it feel infinite. And when you enter the space, you're connected to your social media. And essentially what you go is like through this little journey of confronting yourself to your social media identity. In this case, it was Instagram. We've done it with others as well. But it's really like to put ourselves in context of like, who are we as our digital identity? Is this something that we want to be? Like how intimate or how different it is from who we are as real people. And I think that as we enter into the metaverse, and this is some of the questions, of course, that we're working with our clients working today, is that we realize that most of our lives are portrayed on the internet, and whether we want to admit it or not, like this has become a big part of our identities, and it just means that we have to be more socially conscious of how we represent ourselves and how we also let other people and other brands represent us. So I'm gonna these are all actually photographs. They look surreal, they look like renders, but they're all photographs of the space. And I'll show you guys a video as well. Let me know if I'm running out of time, Jeremy, because I can definitely cut things a lot faster.
Yeah, maybe one more. Maybe show us Bloom and then.
Yeah. Stop it. Cool. And then I guess the last one that I'll show you guys, I mean, maybe I'll have a little bit of time to show some of my artwork as well, but Bloom is one of my latest interactive pieces, and here I'll show a little bit of video afterwards. What we wanted to do is like really try to understand what is that relationship between like the art piece and the observer, like the observer and the observed, and how these two are symbiotic in a way, and like create like a language of conversation between each other, but doesn't necessarily have to be as direct or as linear as we think. It was more like an exploration of what could be like a passive version of this. This is for the entrance of a Capital One building in New York City called 299 Park Avenue. So it's like in the middle of Park Avenue, like a 60-foot large screen. So they didn't want something that was too intense either. But they just wanted something that was interactive without really understanding it. And what I wanted to do here was essentially an art piece that would just continue to evolve, that was just like continuously alive, that would start each day with a randomly chosen hue of color that would change depending on the time, that would change depending on the amount of people in the space. We had a couple of lidar sensors set up in the ceiling, and that essentially like you would just see like this very smooth transition of evolution, almost like if we call it like the living canvas, like if it was like a living piece. So we would see transition of colors, transition of the types of flowers, the blooming of flowers, so like the density of flowers, and also like the movement of the flowers in the space would be coordinated based on the movement of the people. And these are some of the images. Yeah, some days it was really intense, like hot pink. They were like, tone it down. But yeah, and we didn't actually, for the opening, we did a dance piece that I don't have the video of, but when I get it, I'll definitely share with you guys. But yeah, it was just like a very beautiful moment to open with some dancers as well that would be challenging the space or turning the space into what it is. You see the video that I have is super passive, because like when I'm talking about like passive interactivity, it's like incredibly passive. But I'll show it anyways. So for that location, we did 3 different pieces. Bloom, which was the flower one, Spectacle is the second one that you saw, and the one that is right now is called Horizon, which is like an infinite sky and water that changes like the density of the and the formation of the clouds and some water ripples as people pass in the space. And then I guess like the last one that I want to show is my art pieces, which I think it really express more, because like architectural buildings take forever to build. Google headquarters was a 7-year project. The Hard Rock Casino Hotel was a 4.5-year project. Like all of these just like in essence are very slow, and you don't necessarily get to explore all the form and like the intricacies of movement that you would want to in other, like in the digital space. So this is a new series that I've been creating. As I mentioned, like mathematics or like this understanding of rhythm has always been like very intricate in depth of my work. So this new series, which I call it, it's like the floating species, is kind of like a reinterpretation of all these different species, whether it's like from the like very Ernst Haeckel to like radiolaria and diatoms, but also like moths and squids and jellyfish. Like you'll find like a little bit of reminiscence of all of those in there. And I'll show you how they look in animation. I think for me, like these are in a way dancing pieces. I'll show one of these. But essentially for me, these are like dancing creatures, like folding in themselves. And so
I have a quick question.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, so that's a video, but wow. So how do you guys keep, since this is like a virtual demonstration and stuff for audience members and whatnot, how do you keep the loading page time, efficient? So like all of the graphics and stuff that you have going on implemented into the website doesn't make it too heavy.
No. So I mean, it depends. It depends on how you're building it, but it's all usually coordinated through an AV system like Disguise. Like if you're talking about like the Hard Rock Casino and Hotel, that was not real time, but that was all done through Disguise. For the Bloom, for the mural, that was built on Unity. So it was all streamed real time, and that's why it could.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'll let you continue, but thank you so much.
Yeah. So that's why it can evolve. Like it can consistently evolve. It's not pre-rendered or pre-choreographed, but instead it's all running real time. Yeah.
Could I ask you guys to drop the resource links in the event page when you guys are done?
Yes,
just to check out further.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Pico, is that all? You're finished.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pico, for
Thank you so much.
And
Yeah.
and Michael and Clemence, like very inspiring talk. And even though all three of you work in not necessarily the same medium, or there's some intersection, but there are I can see so much in common in the topics and the themes that you guys are exploring, especially when it comes to the virtual and the digital worlds, digital media, and the connectedness of that. So does anyone else have any burning questions for our panelists after the presentation?
If not, we have a bunch of questions, so that might inspire some more if you don't have any at the moment.
I guess this is not a question, but more of a commendment. Yeah, I was brainstorming a bunch, and I could just see so much potential with all three panelists, with what's going on. Especially creating kind of like a virtual environment for artistry, for dance and stuff. And I like that it was tied into NFTs. It's still in its infantile stage, but I just know with the introduction of NFTs, the virtual world for things are going to expand much further. So this is definitely a solid route for everyone, personally.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Good.
Yeah,
interesting
completely
thought,
agree.
Tommy.
Yeah. Okay, Jeremy, do you want to start?
Sure. So again, just for a little time check, we're going to have maybe 20, 30 minutes where we're asking questions to Ewan and I are asking questions to the panelists and them discussing, and then we'll open it up to your questions also if maybe that brings up anything else you'd like to ask. Again, feel free to write things in the chat too, or make notes so you don't forget. So just as a starting point, I was curious, and also panelists, don't feel like all of you have to respond, just whomever has something, to say, or whatever the question inspires for someone. So my first question was, what technological tools define your practice most, and how do they influence your creative process or expression? I think tied into that, I was curious was sort of at what point in your process you involve some of these tools that make it to the final product as well.
I can answer that if you want. I work with a lot of tools. So I would say the one that defines my practice is going to be a very nerdy one, but it's more of a Node.js remote server. And the reason why I'm saying this is because even if I'm using a lot of different tools, the thing that is always at the core is the ability for remote interactions between audience members, and then that needs to go through a remote server. and it happens to be running in Node.js for all of my projects. So streaming live mocap through the metaverse is running on Node.js, and then having people interacting with my wearables is also running on that. So that was your first question. Your second question was also at which point we are involving those tools in the process. And I actually involve those tools throughout the process, but as much as possible, I tend to paper prototype to make sure that I kind of nail down what's the concept and what's the artistic intention and what type of interactions I want to build in before investing too much time on the tech. Because a lot of times, we can envision a lot of crazy architectures and be like, oh, he's going to do this and this. But the essence of the experience is going to be how, at least for the type of work I do, is going to be between how the audience is interacting with the dancers. And then before nailing down this, there's no point in building too much of the tech. So I paper prototype a lot, and then I start integrating some kind of rough prototypes, which I've shown in some of the images they're not pretty, they're kind of quick and dirty, but they are integrating some of the key interactions and then understanding how that will have a relationship with the movement of the dancers. So as early as possible, being able to involve movement with that technology, either to figure out how this is going to bring a constraint into the choreography, or how we need to actually evolve this to enable maybe different type of expressions or interactions with the audience. And to give an example, the floor mat I was presenting, where that had built in virtual reality, that then sends an instruction to my wearables. The first time I prototyped it, I just put an image on the floor in the virtual space, and I had a person telling me where people were standing. Before even building that connectivity, I just faked it completely. But on the other side, when we started working with motion capture, I actually choreographed the entire piece in VR, in mocap, because it was really important to understand what type of movement would read with the tracking of the motion capture, instead of choreographing something completely different and then being a bit disappointed afterwards. So yeah, kind of it's part of the process all the time.
I do have a question about that mocap. Do you also use Unity to transfer the motion capture over into animations, or what program do you use to animate the mocap, if I may ask?
So it depends on the project. Sorry. So the part of the projects I do are going through Unity, where very kind of virtual, translating the motion capture into live animations of those avatars, building interactions. But the project I was showing that is happening in WebXR, this is actually directly using a 3JS. So it's animating the character through the program that we've written in 3JS directly. Way less straightforward, way more annoying to build. But then it makes it accessible on the web for the audience to join. So, that's the trade-off.
And what was the very beginning? You said something about being able to link all the people together. What program was that, or what tool was that called?
So this is using Mozilla Hubs, which is a social VR platform that runs in the browser, and then I've been implementing my own code on top of that on the custom instance of Mozilla Hubs to be able to run the live mocap through it.
Wow. Okay. That's and I know you said the technology I used to light up and stuff with the LED lights and like your sensory. I think one of the guys said there's like a little vibration. Does that so if I touch somebody in the virtual reality world, would it also stimulate the vibrations on my hand or something?
Not on that piece. It would be possible, but you would need to have specialist equipment at the moment. So on like the more kind of mainstream VR side of things, people are starting developing some haptic jackets and then haptic gloves. It's definitely not mass market yet. It's pretty much, you know, in the big kind of electronic shows or still in the labs. But for the piece I was showing, this is something I actually developed myself. That is actually just behind me. This jacket here. Let me show you. Bear with me.
Yeah, please show me your toys.
I've got it here, so you know, I might as well show it here. So I had opened it up, but on this side, this is the capacitive touch section on one side of the body, and then on the other side, we've got an LED, and then inside there is a small haptic motor. And all of that is a lot of electronics that I have exposed because I was doing a demo the other day. That is then connected to my main computer, then connected to a remote server, and then allowing the two dancers to then touch and feel each other in real time. None of that is something that is available yet on the market, which means that as an audience member, if we wanted them to experience the same, we need to provide them with the tech at the moment, or have something happening in a physical space where we give them the equipment and then they can experience it themselves. But this is not, there's always kind of a little bit of this balance where creating that type of experiences of, are we making it accessible for someone from the home where then we are relying on the equipment they have access to, or are we building something in a venue where we can bring the tech for the audience to then experience it? And yeah, there's no, at the moment we can't really do both. Even like expecting people to have a VR headset to join a live performance is a big assumption, and it's not going to make it very accessible.
Yeah, I was asking about that tech because it would really be cool if you can actually make contact with people in a virtual space. Just because it's already cool enough that you can, you know, capture yourself dancing individually, but then imagine like doing a whole ballroom type of showcase. But now the people aren't touching each other. It's just, yeah, you get the idea though. But anyways.
Tommy, really interesting question, but let's see if Pico or Michael have anything else to add to this first question about what sort of technological tools define your practice and how they influence your expression.
No, I mean, I could talk to it, but I think that there's more questions and you have like only 20 minutes left, so maybe we can move on to other things.
That sounds great too. Ewan, you want to ask the next one?
Hello. Yes, so when this might be a bit of a general question. So all three of you have mentioned or discussed in your work this interest in exploring, let's say, the self, like the self-identity in the way we're represented in the world of digital media. Do you see digital media and its network as a liberating tool in general in your self-expression or like the expression as an artist? If so, like how, what's the most liberating side of it, or what do you think are the limitations of that? Does it make sense?
Yeah. I can start with that one. So I think something that's very interesting to think is that when we work inside of digital spaces, it's literally just about visualizing data, right? Or like or describing data, whether it's through visuals or it's through sound or it's through haptics, which is like through vibrations. But essentially, it doesn't mean that it has to translate as direct to the way that we do it here as a human being, right? So the way that we hear is that you can, you take in vibrations, you interpret that into sound, but you can only hear sound, right? You're not tasting sound. But I think that there's something like really interesting thinking that in the virtual space, there could be this programmed synesthesia where you could not only be switching the ways in we interpret data, but also maybe being able to extend them in ways that we didn't think were possible. So because we are reducing the amount of senses that we have in the digital space, like what are other ways that we can enhance them? So is there a way that a certain emotion could be translated into movement, into visuals, into color changes, into, so it's like movement doesn't have to translate just to movement. It can be more than that. And I think that that's where it's like really interesting to think of like, how can we interpret the senses in a more in a more explorative, but also like in a more extensive way than we could in the physical space. Another thing that I think is super interesting is thinking like of the translation or the transformation, almost like a metaphor, like metamorphosis of senses. Like if you start with something that is a physical movement that can then translate and continue to be sound, and then that sound turns into color, like is that something that our minds could interpret as a single gesture? Is that something that we could, because we're always thinking about density rhythms, right? That's how we sense everything. Like all of our senses are just thinking about like how often does it happen? Like how often, to what amplitude, or to what degree? What are the pauses between them? I mean, in essence, like that's dance, that's music, that's architecture, that's all of these forms of expression. So like, could we go from one to another in a seamless way that makes it feel like it's one continuous movement or one continuous language? Yeah, that's things to explore for sure.
I think this is, just to interject, Pico, this is where you were downplaying your role as a choreographer. I think that like you're actually expanding our notion of like what choreography is, right? That it can be potentially more than just bodies moving to preset motion, right? And so I think that, yeah, I just wanted to make that comment on your work when you're talking about it before. And this is a great example of that, right? How you can take something and transform it into a different form. Michael, sorry.
Yes, no, thank you. Yeah, that's exactly it. Thank you, both of you. Yeah, it's great. I've been thinking a lot about this kind of answers the first question for me too, in some like weird, obnoxious, earthy dance person way of like the technology that I always return to is like the body, and being able to think about different ways and approaches of thinking about the digital self and the technology, whether the technology is an extension of the flesh or is like an alternate being, like a secondary performer that you're encountering or working with or against, as in comparison to working with the technology as like a re-envisioning of self or as an extension of self into the digital sphere. And I think Pico, is where your work really excited me, particularly the Samsung one, of like this literal like forced reckoning with the digital self and the way you choreograph that. And then in the Google piece about the way that you choreograph forced reckoning with other through this technology of the space was really fascinating. And same thing, Clem, about how your wearable technology functions as an extension of self, but in the creation of an alternate reimagining of self. And then Pico, I'm curious about this idea about creating a seamless form of gesture, and I'm curious about like the cultural ramifications of that and like the signifiers that are needed. How do we read color and gesture as like culturally specific, and whether or not the digital space is really this like quote unquote like universal place for us to be able to experience that, and how cultural specificities play into that ability to create easy legibility, like you're saying. I think it's really interesting to think through.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to like taxonomies, typologies, right? Like anything that has to do like to the breaking down of a language or the breaking down of an expression. Like if we were to give like a cultural relevance or a cultural silo to a set of colors, but it doesn't necessarily have to be just the colors themselves, but like it's the combination of them, to what percentage, to what degree, to what frequency. Like could you feel that represents a culture in itself? And maybe it does. Like maybe like when you think about like Icelandic culture versus like African or South American, you could describe them just by a set of rhythm and colors. And I think that's something super interesting to think of, is that it's different forms of language, right? Different forms of language that maybe we haven't explored yet.
Yes, thank you. It's exciting. It makes me excited. Thank you.
Well, yeah, it's very interesting. To sort of tag onto that, I guess I'm wondering if any of you have more detailed thoughts about, how the body transforms in digital space. Like how, Michael, I was thinking of you in particular with this question, how this impacts traditional forms of or traditional notions of embodiment, right? Like what it means to have a particular identity. So as Pico, you're talking about being able to, represent certain places or cultures with a rhythm and a color, right? What does that do in terms of separating these things, these rhythms and colors from the people, who created them? Or like, how does this notion of our identity, personal identity and cultural identity that is traditionally very bound up in our physical bodies, what happens to it as we go to this digital realm?
Yeah, and I think that's also something super interesting that in the questions that you sent before was about this conversion between like being human, connection, empathy, and abstraction, and how you have to be like continuously going back and forth so you don't lose the connection with people, right? So it's like you go from, and this is also like why the translation to the metaverse is such a it's such an interesting experiment, because you don't want to do exactly what already exists, but you don't want to do something so abstract that people don't comprehend it or don't connect with it, right? So like what are the limits, or like how can you be going like back and forth, or like almost like choreographing that connection, or almost like pushing the boundaries of that connection. So one of the things that I think you mentioned, Jeremy, was how facial expression and body expression was the empathy bridge between the choreographer, the person that's expressing the feeling, and the people in the audience that are receiving it. So it's like if we don't have faces, or we do have faces, like if we're not expressing just with faces, in the virtual world, like what are the ways that we can generate empathy?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's such a great question. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. I think about this a lot. I think particularly right now in this like most recent piece I've been working on, I'm thinking a lot about forms of like queer gesture. What are signifiers, especially in communities and performances of like ethnicity or of queerness, or things that are visibilized particularly through the body rather than through some kind of external signifier, about how those translations become and move, and what are like other visual cues that are already assigned to that. What is like, I'm really interested about this idea of like the flowers blooming and the petals opening and closing. How do those become new lexicons for like other like gestures that we have that have already been culturally read, like you're saying, when there's not a face. It's exciting to see. It makes me think about, I'm sorry, I'm hyperfixating on the colors now because it's really interesting to me. I'm thinking about like like when is it a queer rainbow, or when is it an autism rainbow, or when is it like all these different ways that these specific colors read. And I think that's, I don't know, both of your works excite me because you're putting them in spaces too that are very specific. Yeah. Yes.
Can I just add maybe on top of that, there's also having kind of had to make a few decisions about, how we're representing the body in these virtual spaces in some of our pieces. There are a few questions that came up from a performer point of view of our agency and our role in those representations. And there's also this idea that as a performer, are we puppeteering another character, or is this an expression of our own body? And even if, yes, we can use costumes and makeup when we're on stage, this is still our own body that is expressing the story we're trying to tell, where in the virtual space, we are just a tool behind the creation of a visual. And then how much do we want to just be a tool because there's a lot of abstraction, and then the performer is following a set of rules to create a set of visuals, or is this matching the reality of the body, and this is expressing what the performer is doing? And I don't have the answer to that, but but there's been a lot of the time, especially working with mocap, this question of, am I feeling connected to what I'm doing, or am I working technically to make it look like the way we want to look like, for then the audience to read the story we want behind it? And I think the first time where I have felt connected to this character that I was performing is when I was in VR myself and I was then in front of an audience, versus having a projection or having a flat screen representation of that image. And for me, this is when it clicked. It's like, oh, okay, I get it now. I get it now, because now I'm co-present with the audience, and then we can start looking at different identities and then different stories we're telling. But I also wanted to share a second story. I very recently started dancing in VR chat with a community of other dancers, and it's a lot of fun. But VR chat is a very specific community. And I got invited to join this kind of subculture of VR chat dancers, and they all have trackers, and then they all, are able to actually track their entire body. And there's been the moment where I had to pick my avatar. And this time around, it was not necessarily in a written performance context, but more, how do I represent myself in that environment? And I still haven't made a decision. I'm like 2 weeks in, making mood boards about how do I reinvent myself in that digital space. And it's almost like now this is so open that I don't even know who I am anymore. I have to make those choices of, getting rid of any gender, culture, heritage, or do I actually want to embrace all of that and then make it part of my identity? And having to navigate this because there's kind of less rules, especially in those kind of safe environments, which, there are other questions of then in fully open digital spaces, how do you present yourself? And then is this a safe space by design, or this open to kind of other forms of harassment? But that's almost another conversation. From an identity point of view, I think then, even as an audience member joining a virtual show, how are we dressing them? And do they have agency to be represented in a certain way? And is this getting disruptive to the performance? And all of those questions, I think the platforms are not answering those questions yet. And as artists, we have this ability to be part of that conversation and maybe start bringing some answers to that, which I don't have yet.
Wow. Thank you all for your answers. Actually, this is you guys already answered some of the questions that I wanted to ask before, which is like in my understanding, or the way that I interpret dance, is that there's so much empathy that we're expressed through the body movement. Like when you're dancing, you're using this body that every human being has. We all we feel it when people move a certain way. And I was really curious about how that gets translated into the digital space, where it's not, you have so much opportunity to create things that are abstracted, that are not necessarily restricted to the human form, and how does that express? But you guys have already touched upon that, and I just want to kind of get into more about kind of geometry, space, the more like formal aspect of things. Because like what's really interesting between design, digital space, architecture, choreography is that they're all expressions of form and geometry. And it's a matter of what tools you're using to express that, whether it's algorithm or design tools or body. I guess for Michael and Clem, the question is more towards like how in your work, how does creating that space around you or set design influence the way that you curate your dance work, which you guys have brought up before a little bit, and also in the case of Pico, how does your background in dance and choreography come to influence your design work?
I'll just start off by saying, for the most part, I don't compose any of the work. I usually work with choreographers, and then I am just the kind of stick that asks all the questions that they don't like as a performer. And that's okay, that's who I am. But so yes, this question is really interesting because I think sometimes I've experienced it many different ways of there are experiences where the media can feel like it's an imposition on the process of moving beyond or through the body, and there are other times where like we've walked into rehearsal and it's like the computer has crashed, we all go home. There's no way to work beyond or without it. And then there are other experiences where it's like, okay, this is a part of the glitch of working with this. This would be no different than like if one of the performers came in and was like, I strained my hamstring today, I have to take it easy. How can we work through it and around and with this? And I think that's an interesting form of a different question of accessibility with this, accessibility in the unexpected. And so I just gave the worst roundabout answer, but that's my experience. Yes.
I wanna bounce back on what you were saying about the computer crash and we all have to go home, or how to embrace the computer being injured. I wanted to share just an experience from the last performance I did on Once the Waters with a mocap suit, where it was a live performance. So when it's your turn, you're waiting in the wings and it's time to go, you have to go. And then we had a few days in a row where I had lost my right arm, the tracking of my right arm, like three seconds before going live. And it was like, okay, what do we do? Do we hold on the show? Do we go? Do we restart? There's a really big risk in those cases where, because it's digital, that people are just going to turn off their computers. They're not going to stick around. It's not, you can't hold them hostage the same way you have them in a theater. Well, then we went live with one arm. It's fine. The arm was a little bit like this, and it was okay. And just kind of try to improvise as performers. That's what we do. And I was on Discord with the other performer, and I was like, my arm is not going through. Just mirror me. And then we improvised, and it's fine. We just like re-choreographed it live, and no one knew. And I feel you have to kind of embrace those technical glitches, because I feel that none of the tech I use in my work is made for live performance. It's a big hack of game engines or things that are made for, I don't know, sensors and stuff like that. This is not made for live performances. So it will crash, it will not work. And I think I've became a better performer, being like really, really good at improvising with everything now and just adapting when things don't work. But kind of going back to your initial question, Ewan, as well, about geometry and then creating space. I think there's something really liberating about creating your own world, being completely free of the constraint of the physical space. Don't have to think about the stage. You can actually choreograph where the audience is going to move around. There's very much some work of an architect to think about how people are going to enter the space, how they're going to position yourself, and then when you're choreographing the piece, which angle are you going to take, because you're imagining that the audience is going to be in a certain part of that virtual world, but also being comfortable with people just wandering around and you've lost them, and then how do you embrace that, which is then taking a few pages from immersive theatre books and understanding how do you, with light and sound and having gestures and bringing people in what they should be watching, because you can't frame things anymore. And then if they want to wander around and then look behind the scenes, that's fine. You can't really stop them. And I think it's just being comfortable with that. But it's very liberating. It's a bit daunting because you have to design everything. I feel that as a creator, then you can control everything, and you can also decide that at some point everyone's going to fly or someone's going to be hanging from the ceiling, and that's also pretty cool because we can change scale and physics properties and all of that, and that opens the door to a lot of creativity.
Yeah, it sounds like you have to be you have to cultivate kind of open mind for unexpected behaviors in this completely new format, which is quite interesting because you're always learning something new. Pico, do you have anything to add to the question?
No, I think
Or-
that was, yeah, very well received.
It's okay. We still have like so much question. I know we're running out of time. So, Jeremy, do you want to throw in another one?
Yeah, we're just going to ask a couple more. So I have a question. Someone touched on this, I think, Michael, about accessibility. I'm really interested, in terms of what the three of you think about accessibility. Can technology make dance and movement more accessible? Concert dance in particular has been sort of an elite art. Takes, a lot of resources or training to be involved in it as a performer or director. Often takes a lot of resources or a certain community where it's being presented. Um, you know, do some of the things that you all are working on, does it help lower that barrier? Does it help bring it to different audiences? Or do you sort of feel the opposite, like some of the technological advances are widening some of these gaps?
Well, I think the fact that we're looking at virtual environments that can be accessed through a computer instead of having to physically go to a space already opens it up to a global audience, right? And it's not just because the fact that you get access it through your computer, but also it's the fact that the price points are also changed, right? I think in a sense, dance art have always been tailored to like the elites. I mean, of course, that has changed throughout time, but it's not. It's expensive to go to theater, to go to ballet, to go to all of these types of performances. And I mean, and we do it because we find it culturally relevant and entertainment, but at the same time, you can't say that 100% of the population has access to the same. So I think what's super interesting, whether it's through streaming or through like a virtual environment through the metaverse, is really just being able to have like a complete global audience of like fully mixed demographics being able to access the space. And I think that's super interesting and relevant and pressing today. But thank you so much, Jeremy. I do have a business call that I need to attend to at 1:30. But really, thank you so much for having me here. It was great to meet everyone today. Yeah, Michael Clemens, please hit me up on, I messaged you guys in Instagram, and I think that there's like a lot of great conversations and projects that we should start considering. And yeah, Tommy, I love your questions too. So please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions. And yeah, thank you all. It was great seeing you.
Pico, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Was that Pico?
Yeah, that was Pico.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
So, Clem and Michael, do you guys want to continue with the question of accessibility?
This is one of my kind of main concern at the moment, working with mocap. And I feel like on one hand, that opens the door to a lot of potential accessibility, having, the right tools for audience members to potentially join in VR, having BSL transcriptions, not having to go to physical spaces. But at the same time, some of the technology has been designed for able bodies at the moment. The mocap suits I'm using camera-less mocap suits, which means that it senses you put it on the body and it does not work if you cannot stand in a T-pose. So that's like literally like the first blocker, the first barrier. So those suits are not accessible at all for non-able bodies or non-normative bodies. So through Goldsmiths and the research project I'm part of, we are running, as part of the work streams we're doing, a full project around accessibility and how we can make motion capture more accessible and using machine learning to enable some of those interactions with differently able dancers. We're working with Koda Dance and Kendoko Dance in the UK. So that's going to be really interesting to see what would be the outcome. But there is, on one hand, like digital could be more accessible, but we kind of constantly need to have this responsibility as artists to make sure the accessibility requirements are in for audience members to join, because there's we need to think about all that inclusion, and then it's often the platforms are not doing it by default. So we kind of need to think about how do you add those features and how do you enable that in. Tommy, I can see your hand.
May I give a suggestion? This popped in my head, but it might be something to develop further as a flexibility for accessibility. So I do have a friend who has muscular dystrophy, so he can't do that thing where you go into the T-pose at all. He can't lift his arms up. But I did find out about these vests where instead of listening to music just through your headphones, you could feel the vibrations throughout your whole body. So in a way, I think it was Yemen or Yewen that said, it's different forms of language. So maybe in the interaction, you guys might be doing very physical movements, but then the way they can experience those for people who cannot move is through bodily sensations. So if you can change and adjust the colors with certain points of your fingertips, then I also believe you can do that with audio cues as well. And that's just giving a suggestion for what you can potentially do.
Yeah, very interesting suggestion, Tommy. If you can share a link in the chat, then we'll all have access. We can all look into that in the future. Yeah, and Clem, do you have anything else to add, or should we? Michael, do you have anything?
I think they both pointed to like the potentials and pitfalls. I think it's an exciting conversation, but I don't really have anything to add. To see, I think Pico's work in particular too also is really interesting in the way that we question who the dancer is and what accessibility that that creates or new inaccessibilities. I mean, my work is just as inaccessible. It's all still proscenium dance work, and I recognize that. So.
Amazing. So I guess we will ask one last question and then we'll wrap it up. So what are you guys' view on the next? Do you have any projections of how you see the digital forms of dance evolving in the next 2 years? Like, especially like in terms of like the metaverse development and like the bigger context of the digital world, or like how do you see your own personal world like fit in the narrative, or what are your own, I guess, plan for the future for the next 2 years in this kind of practice?
I'll just speak briefly. I think particularly here at the University of Iowa, there has been a reckoning with like the trauma of the pandemic and the forced co-opting of digital avatars and the way that digital dance has proliferated in a sort of haphazard way. And we're seeing a big rebound away from that as folks are starting to, again, reject digital forms of embodiment in favor of live performance. So I'm really hopeful and curious about continuing work that integrates live embodiment with digital forms of self so that we can continue this dialogue in a way that is not a this or that sort of mentality. So I'm looking forward to that a lot into the future.
I've noticed exactly the same, Michael, so I'm glad you're mentioning this. I feel there's going to be a little bit of a divide of wanting to have visceral, physical performances that people can experience in real life, and then technology will be there, but a little bit more in the background, a little bit more as an enabler. And I think even then in the metaverse, will probably be there to enable some experiences from everyone instead of turning into the spectacular and the very visual side of things. One thing I feel from a metaverse point of view is that we, at the moment, it's still kind of the artists will sometimes have access to the technology to bring embodiment into the virtual space, but at the moment, there is still a very, very technological challenge of bringing everyone with a full body into a virtual space. So we're still kind of stuck with a 3-point tracking, head, hands, if people have a VR headset, which really limits the amount of effect and empathy you can develop with another body. We do not have face tracking either, again, as a consumer market side of things. So what I'm seeing as a slow trend is the ability to track more bodies and having this more accessible into virtual spaces, to then have not necessarily a concert form of virtual embodiment, but more, communal experiences of people dancing in virtual spaces. And I wish this is where the things would go, and then having more, bringing people in virtual classes, virtual dance jam, virtual experiences where we can all have a body in the virtual space, and then have a shared experience there. So that's what I'm wishing for, and I hope it's going to go there. On the other side, I still kind of want to explore things in real life because I miss it a little bit as well as an artist.
Wow.
Well,
Very interesting. Yeah, really interesting. We could discuss these all day, and we will keep discussing them in evolving, an evolving conversation as all of this evolves. Before we sort of close the formal part of our presentation or our event, does anyone have any other questions you want to ask Michael or Clem?
I actually have a question I want to ask you, Jeremy. Could you keep me involved with this type of stuff more? I'm learning a lot. I've like my mind is about to blow into pieces right now because I'm like trying to put it all in. But yeah, I gotta be honest with you. So I'm
Amazing.
sitting here like, I'm trying to like stay quiet, but I'm like a little kid in the classroom, just like, but fun classroom, not like boring lecture type classrooms. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyways, that's it.
Absolutely. So we have an Instagram page, Sculpture. We can put all these in the chat as well as Clem and Michael's online presences. Please, if you don't mind putting those in there. So Sculpture, I'll put that there. We also have Facebook. You can find us on Facebook at Sculpture. And I'm sending out a little survey if you have time to take. It's 3 questions, 3 very short questions. Just about this event, and at the bottom there's a spot where you can put your email if you want to be on our mailing list of future events like this, future performances, discussions, etc. So definitely, it's great to hear, Tommy. Thank you for your interest. Any other last questions or responses?
I just wanted to say thank you for curating it and having us here. It was really wonderful to see the breadth of mediated embodiment and how everyone's working through that. It's exciting.
yeah, so thank you all so much for coming, and especially Michael and Clemens, and thank you so much. And Pico, unfortunately, she's not around, but thank you so much. And like this has gone like so much better than I even expected, and I'm sure everyone has learned so much. And thank you everyone for attending, being here for the whole session means a lot. And this is the first event that me and Jeremy has done from Sculpture, and we would really appreciate some feedbacks, how we can do better, what other type of information or other formats do you think we can try and implement and source or research. Please feel free to reach out to us anytime. Let us know how we can do better. And for now, we're gonna stick around for a little bit more. I'm sure, like in the audience, everyone else probably have really interesting projects yourself as well. So please come forward if you want to share your work or if you want to introduce yourself, tell us what you're about or what you're interested in. Especially related to dance, digital media. Feel free to come forward.
Our idea was, so if you have to go, feel free. to go. We're sort of closing the formal part of our panel discussion Q&A, but we wanted to have a bit of a networking event. So like Ewan said, we would love to hear from those of you who haven't spoken yet, if you're interested in just telling us a little bit about your interests, your background. If you'd like to, again, if you'd like to be involved in projects like this, if you're working on something related.
Yeah, I can share. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Nina.
I'm Nina. Hi. So I'm a Canadian artist, but I'm actually based in London, UK right now. But yeah, so I shared my podcast, which was actually pre-pandemic. The last episode was released as the pandemic was happening. So it was a consideration of future technologies and its implications on the body and our forms of human expression and communication in the consideration of kind of intergenerational, intercultural integration of technology, exponential technology specifically, on the body and dance as an art form. So I brought Canadian artists together in partnership with technologists, people who are coding and designing the technology that we all use, and trying to fuse like the bridge between the two worlds so that the dance world and body-based practitioners can share their practices and philosophies with technologists to kind of integrate the worlds of how we can shape a better future in considerations of words like embodiment that get tossed around in virtual reality, but may mean something very different than what a body-based practitioner calls embodiment. So embodiment versus disembodiment, really. Yeah, so that was with them. And then also with the woman here in London, Clem, and maybe Delmac, you might know Ghislaine Boddington, who has done a lot of pioneer work in considerations of intimacy in the body and telepresence. So yeah, you should look her up. She's kind of a pioneer since the 1980s in considering kind of ways to connect people digitally before when we still just were working with TVs and looking at how to integrate recordings into digital intimacy. Anyways, that was a long story, but my history is as a dancer and choreographer, and I'm also a movement psychotherapist. And now I'm doing my doctoral research in developing ways to measure the psychological and physiological impact of social virtual environments on the body so that we can begin to design better experiences in the consideration of a metaverse that we're all going to be living in quite intensely, either consciously or unconsciously or willingly or unwillingly. Yeah. And I think, body-based practitioners, all of us who are really value the body, have a lot to contribute to the shaping of this technology and how across society, not just dance as an art form, our voices need to be heard because this disembodiment piece is significant for our mental health and wellness. And it's an important part, I think, to consider as this technology shapes the future. Yeah. I think that's everything I could say right now, but yeah, would love to connect with you and continue to be part of the conversation. Yeah, I'm also writing a white paper for the Canada Council for the Arts around this conversation of the metaverse and implications of the body and dance as a form of expression in a digital environment and all those kinds of questions around that. Yeah.
Wow, that's super interesting. There's a lot in what you just said, and this is amazing. And I'm so glad that you joined the conversation. And I would love to look more into your work as well. Definitely the podcast you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll share it in the chat again. And yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a little older than you guys, so I'm not doing the Instagram, Facebook thing, but I am doing the LinkedIn thing. I'm also kind of anti-meta at the moment as well. So prefer not to be on those platforms, those platforms. So I'll see you on
completely fair enough.
to join that group. Yeah. But I'll share.
I mean, that's also what we're trying to do, is to build our own platform so we can gather people who's like-minded and who can connect through a shared of interest rather than, social media. But yes, would very much love to keep you involved in what we're doing in the future. I'll connect you through LinkedIn. And yeah, looking forward to more stuff from you in the future.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You know, I'm sorry, this is self-indulgent. I'm just curious, what kind of methods do you use, like in your research of studying the effects on mental health and extensions into like the digital metasphere?
Yeah, it's all very early days in terms of understanding the implications of virtual environments. So my preliminary research is around biometric feedback and eye tracking data and understanding the eye's response to virtual environments. And there are some research studies and databases we can look at for emotional recognition through eye tracking. And because we're wearing headsets to be able to experience the virtual realm or the metaverse, there is the capability to do that. We just need to kind of develop the baseline of what that means for us. And that brings up a whole bunch of questions around ethics and data and privacy and all of those questions. Yeah, I'm not looking to solve those problems right now. I'm looking to kind of understand and then, you know, share the knowledge to consider, you know, what does that mean for our privacy, what that means about our, you know, because the combination of biometric data around your EEG, your ECG, EMG, your galvanized skin response, your eye tracking is as identifiable as your fingerprint. Like the combination of how your body communicates in the digital space is very unique to each one of us. And so that digital identity, I believe like we need to take ownership of that, just like we take ownership over our physical bodies, our physical entity. We need to take over our control and our power over that digital entity, which is a shift in the paradigm in which we engage with technology right now. Sorry, did that answer your question, Michael?
Yes, no, it does. Thank you. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Wow, yeah, that can be the topic of our next discussion, I think, a lot of that. I'd love to hear from anyone else who wants to share what they're working on or any of their interests or what brings them here. If you'd like, no pressure, of course. If you want to be a fly on the wall, no pressure.
If you feel shy and you want someone else to share first, let me know.
Oh. If no one wants to jump up, since Michael, you have to run, maybe we should end here.
And by the way, if you guys want to keep following us in the future, please send us your email or
I'm copying the survey again that has a form you can put your email in.
Yeah, by doing the survey, you help us improve in the future, and also leave us your contact so we can send you updates for next events.
All right, thank you all so much for coming. Please, before you leave, before we quit this chat, you know, click and copy any of the links here, connect to all these amazing people, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you again so much, Michael and Clem, for
Thank you so much
coming and being part of this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure. All right, have a great evening or night, wherever you are, afternoon, morning, wherever you are on the earth. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you, Jeremy. Thank you, Yuan.
Thanks for coming, Tommy.
Yep. I'll see you guys soon.
Bye.
See you.